Up in smoke, the e-cigarette that exploded and wrecked a flat after it was plugged into the wrong charger.
Looking at the effects of a stroke, it can happen to young people too.
And let's hear it for the Black Country, a new anthem to celebrate the life of one of its sons. That's at 6. Tonight, the flat wrecked by an e-cigarette as it's plugged into the wrong charger. We'll have the details next.
The ITV National News is on the way in half an hour's time after the news where you are.
You're watching ITV News Central. On our programme tonight, the lucky escape for a young family after a fire from an exploding electronic cigarette.
Trying to carry the children down, 2 of them, both frightened. It was horrific.
How this woman was left paralysed down one side after a major stroke at just 20 years old.
The countdown is on for Froch versus Groves in one of the biggest boxing bouts in history.
I vow to thee, Black Country.
And high hopes that this Black Country anthem can conquer the charts.
Good evening. A young family had a lucky escape from a flat which was wrecked by fire after an electronic cigarette exploded. Keely Cooper managed to get her 2 boys out of their room just before the flat was engulfed in smoke and flames.
The fire broke out as the boys were asleep in bed. Keely was alerted when she heard a bang and saw a flash as the e-cigarette was being charged using a plug in her own bedroom next to them. Keith Wilkinson reports.
This is all that remains of Keely Cooper's bedroom at her council flat. Destroyed by fire shortly after the electronic cigarette she was recharging at this plug burst into flames. In the next room, her 2 young sons, Ellis and Regan, were fast asleep. She got them out before their room was filled with dense smoke. And as she escaped with them down 3 stories at her flat in Shard End, Birmingham, she raised the alarm on every floor to get out her neighbours. I
heard a bang. I jumped up to have a look what it was because I'd kind of seen like orange fly past. I got up and it on the floor was on fire. I got some water and I put that out and I thought that was the end of it. And then I looked and smoke and stuff was coming from all under the bed. It was horrible trying to carry the children down, 2 of them, both frightened yourself and then frightened. It was horrific.
There have been a number of other fires recently involving e-cigarettes, and these have been blamed partly on people using chargers that didn't come with the devices. Keely says she used a phone charger plug as the cigarette she bought did not come with its own. West Midlands Fire Service has warned people they shouldn't mix and match chargers, cables or devices and should follow manufacturer's advice.
This one didn't come with a plug though. It came with the charger port and everything else but no plug. So I was using my own well-known brands. You'd think it was okay. And it's the charger and the equipment that I've used from day one, and it just out of the blue one day just blew up.
Keely says she's now given up smoking, tobacco and electronic. She says she's just glad she managed to get everyone out unscathed. Had she been asleep when the fire broke out, this could so easily have been a very different story. Keith Wilkinson, ITV News.
Police are investigating claims that a schoolgirl was sexually assaulted on a bus in Birmingham. Officers have released a CCTV image of a man they'd like to speak to. The 15-year-old girl was allegedly attacked on the number 50 bus heading towards Maypole in Birmingham. The man's described as Asian and in his 40s.
More people are killed or injured in crashes involving a new driver in the West Mercia region compared to anywhere else in the Midlands. A report by the RAC Foundation found more than 15% of accidents in which people are killed or hurt involve drivers aged 17 to 19. It's led to calls for graduated licensing, which could see probation periods and curfews for new drivers.
Well, the number of children arrested across the West Midlands has fallen dramatically in the last 5 years. West Mercia Police saw the biggest fall, arresting 77% fewer children last year than in 2008. That's a drop from 7,500 to just under 1,800.
The mainstream political parties are tonight assessing their mixed fortunes after an historic victory for UKIP in the European elections. Here in the West Midlands, they came top of the polls, securing 3 new MEPs.
Well, the biggest losers of the night were the Liberal Democrats, who lost their only seat. Our reporter Nancy Cole's been looking at the political picture for the region and, by golly, significant gains for UKIP.
Yeah, Nigel Farage has been talking about a UKIP army on the march, and by George, he really has achieved it here in the West Midlands. UKIP has seen a big jump in their share of the vote compared to the last time these elections were held. Now, Labour came in at second place, the Conservatives were bumped down to third, and as you said, the Lib Dems were really nowhere to be seen. They lost their only seat. And that's led many calls for party leader Nick Clegg to consider his position. We've spoken to Matthew Hulbert, a local Lib Dem councillor at Hinckley and Bosworth, and asked him, is it time for Clegg to go?
I'm not calling for him to go. I'm calling for him and others at the top of the party, our MPs, our ministers, the staff of the party, to look again at the message we've been putting out.
So, Nancy, do people in the West Midlands really understand what UKIP is all about?
Well, we all know they want us to leave Europe, and they say they'll work towards doing that in the European Parliament. Now, some people believe that they've been using UKIP as a protest vote, with some disillusioned with the traditional parties. But this success is most certainly a wake-up call for the main three. Now, UKIP insists they're a grown-up party and they value the faith that's been placed in them. And they now have 3 MEPs raring to go, including Jill Seymour, who's been a UKIP member for 13 years. She says she's delighted to represent the region in Brussels.
Over the next term, the 5 years, I want to make sure that the general public in the West Midlands actually understand what the EU is about, how it affects their lives, how the European Commissioners are the ones that actually make those decisions, not the MEPs and not those in Westminster.
So there you have it, 3 seats in Brussels. The question is, how will they do in Westminster next year?
The big question. Thank you, Nancy.
Now, it's emerged that a Muslim school in Birmingham turned away new governors after the council began a takeover following persistently poor teaching and management. Birmingham City Council education bosses say staff at the Al-Hijar school in Bordsley Green refused to cooperate when members of an interim governing board arrived last week. An Ofsted snap inspection revealed a serious decline in classroom standards. The school is not one of the 25 being looked at as part of the citywide Operation Trojan investigation. The interim board say they'll revisit on Monday to meet with staff and parents.
Police officers in the West Midlands, Warwickshire and West Mercia forces are among the least fit in the country, according to official figures. About 5.5% of officers in the forces failed new fitness tests, which are due to become mandatory later this year. The police chief behind the testing also recommends that tests should get harder from 2018.
You're watching ITV News Central. Still to come, can this Black Country anthem become a charity chart topper?
Now, it's something which we associate with the over 65s, but a 20-year-old woman has been telling how her life turned upside down when she suffered a stroke, leaving her paralysed down one side.
Here in the West Midlands, around 11,600 people have a stroke. That's every year, and more than 100,000 live with the effects of stroke.
Elizabeth Ashmore spoke to ITV News during Stroke Month to raise awareness about the condition and to highlight the fact it can affect anyone. Sarah Saunders reports.
Elizabeth Ashmore was a typical 20-year-old girl. But overnight, her life changed forever when she had a major stroke and woke up paralysed down one side.
Like, I couldn't hold my body, my legs kind of just gave way and I just fell, and I was quite scared, and obviously I could see my reflection in the mirror and I thought to myself, like, is this a seizure? Like, I've never had this happen before. On the phone it was like, oh, I think she's had a stroke, and you know, like when you hear, how old is she? She's 20. Obviously their reaction is kind of, oh, you know, like, I doubt it.
Elizabeth spent 6 weeks in hospital, first fighting for her life, then learning to walk again.
I have to get dressed with one arm, I have to do everything with one arm. I have to learn how to like relive my life with one arm, and I have to learn how to walk again. Like my ankle and my toes don't move, so obviously I do everything with my right foot that I can't with my left.
75% of strokes involve the over 65s, but anyone can be affected.
When a stroke strikes, the damage spreads like a fire in the brain.
Adverts from the Stroke Association and Public Health England encourage us to act fast.
They're much more prevalent in over 65s, but 1 in 4 strokes will occur in people under 65. Babies can have strokes even in the womb. And our FAST campaign is all about face, arms, speech, time to call 999. If you meet the FAST test, you need to call an ambulance straight away, because the sooner you can get to hospital and more likely to reduce damage.
Elizabeth has 2 messages. Act fast, but also that a stroke doesn't have to be the end of a life.
I look at life differently to how I did before. I mean, before I was quite an anxious person, and now I kind of just sit in my wheelchair and think, well, I've got to do it someday, so it may as well be today.
Sarah Saunders, ITV News.